Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. I always use chess.com's tools to analyse my games after a match to reflect on my choices and to learn. Occasionally, in the analysis, the computer suggests an amazingly good line that I wish I saw in the game. In the game I played today after work, the opponent made an aggressive and unusual move on turn 3. It's interesting what Stockfish 14 saw as the best response. I hope you enjoy! So let's start first with a review of the game. So this is the analysis by the algorithm. So I did, I suppose, okay. Accuracy of 75.2%, so not fantastic, but perhaps somewhat better than my opponent, who certainly had more inaccuracies and a couple of blunders. So let's have a look at the analysis. So I played white in this game, opponent black, and as usual when I have white I try to play the Vienna. So e4, e5, knight c3, opponent plays knight c6, I develop my bishop to c4, and the opponent now does a move that I did not expect. So knight a5 with an immediate attack on the bishop. Now, I was fairly sure that this was a bad move, but I couldn't quite work out how to make this work. So obviously bishop here would not make sense, given that it will be immediately under attack by a pawn. So the opponent gets to develop a pawn and I'll be losing tempo. Potentially retreating the bishop either to d3, which seems to block in my d pawn, or maybe to e2. I suppose that sort of made a bit of sense as well, but I didn't want to give up the bishop's position in terms of pressuring the opponent's weak f pawn. So my eventual decision, and it took me a little bit of time, was to actually place the bishop on b3, inviting a trade, but then it would allow me an open A file for my rook. And I thought that was probably okay. That was a reasonable compensation. Now, what did Stockfish think insofar as the server-based analysis, which uses Stockfish 12? So it reckoned that the bishop's retreat to e2 was best. But what I discovered when I was also looking at the self-analysis line, which uses Stockfish 14, was that there was this much more winning line, and suggesting directly capturing the pawn on f7. And this is really quite a gangster move. So capture with check, queen capture, the king captures back. Now queen to h5 with check. The opponent can develop their pawn to block to g6, and then queen captures pawn on e5. Now forking the rook and the knight. The most natural move here is probably bishop to g7, blocking and protecting the rook. And that's probably the best move. But then, queen captures. Queen has a number of options here. Could place the king in check on d5, or potentially can just directly capture the knight. And here the white is basically a piece up. So amazing that Stockfish 14 could identify that line and Stockfish 12 did not identify the line. Anyway, let's go back to the game as it was played. So as I said, I put my bishop onto b3, inviting the trade. The opponent decides to accept, and I capture back with pawn, with now the open A file for my rook. The opponent plays c6, I played d3. I could have played d4 with an immediate attack on the center. I decided to not play that way. I decided to just play with my chain of pawns. I did see that that was an option, and I do see that that was better. But in this game, I decided to play a little bit more conservatively. Opponent develops pawn to d6. I play f4 directly. So this is sort of a Vienna type game style. Opponent develops their knight to h6. I'm not entirely sure of the reason. Again, I knew that probably wasn't that good. Potentially, I think the opponent was trying to prevent a pawn push to f5 and connect 4. I suppose that's fair enough. I developed my knight to f3, and very common in these situations, the opponent brings out their bishop to g4, ostensibly trying to pin the knight to the queen. Now, in these games, it generally doesn't really work, and there's a number of potential responses. Directly trying to kick out the bishop. What I actually like to do in these situations is to actually advance the pawn on the f file to f5, effectively now trapping that bishop, basically forcing the bishop to capture, and then allows me to develop the queen. That's just the way I like to play. And there we go. Now with h3, asking the question, what are you going to do with the bishop? Usually they capture, allows me to capture back with the queen, and in these positions, usually white is ahead. Opponent captures, I captured back with the queen here, so centralize the queen, and I'm feeling pretty good. And Stockfish agrees that with a plus 2.5. Opponent develops another pawn to f6, that's fine. And here, the Stockfish wants a really aggressive move to immediately sort of just whack that knight. I kind of wanted to keep my bishop in this setting, so even though I did sort of wonder whether or not that would be a good move, I thought it would be better not to do that. The opponent plays d6, which, yeah, I suppose it doesn't achieve a whole lot. I play e3, so moving my bishop, so so having access to the diagonals, and also now connecting the rooks. Opponent plays a knight to f7, retreating the knight from a position that's not looking very good for it. I played h4, so Stockfish didn't like it very much. My idea was that I didn't want the knight to go to g5 with an attack on the attack on the queen. However, here I had an opportunity to potentially capture another piece, so basically capture a rook. The opponent would be forced to trade rooks after that, so that would be good. Again, I didn't feel like immediately liquidating the pieces at the moment. Opponent plays h6, which I suppose it's all right, doesn't do very much for them. I bring my rook out with the idea that I'm going to try to crack open the center with my d-pawn. Again, I was reasonably sure that this was not a good move by my opponent, moving their king voluntarily, potentially in line with the rook. Pretty sure that was not good. Push the d-pawn forward. Yeah, but wasn't entirely sure of the rationale there. D-pawn forward again. No, the Stockfish reckons that was better. Yeah, I didn't quite like that, I suppose. Yeah, so I chose not to do that. The opponent sort of moving their king around, and yeah, I think these series of moves really weakened the opponent's defense of their king. Capture with the pawn, they captured back, queen now in line, and basically also pinning this pawn. So now I've got a potential powerful attack with the knight. The opponent sort of shuffles their queen across, and the attack with the knight. Opponent they're forced to move. Now at this position, again, I didn't see the potential best line. So if we sort of drop down to self-analysis, a really, really powerful move that would have put me substantially ahead on material was to capture the knight with the queen, basically pinning the queen to the king. So opponent is forced to take back. Now a fork with the knight and the queen. Wherever the king goes, the queen is lost. And at the end of that exchange, we have lost both our queens, but I have both rooks and still 2 minor pieces. Opponent only has 2 rooks. This is a completely winning position now for white. Now, I did not see that during the actual game. So in the actual game, I sort of captured the bishop. The opponent captures back. Now check. Opponent pulls their king out of the way. But now I've got this capture with the rook, which is of course protected by the queen. And now things are looking very, very good for me, looking very good. Now, the opponent should have recognized that that queen is lost one way or another, or given just with the geometry here, something is going to be lost. Here, this gave me the opportunity now to put the king in check with the rook. Opponent, of course, forced to bring their king over, or else would lose their queen. However, I've still got another rook down here. So to the d file, check again, king forced to move again, and now I've got the attack with the rook. So basically, opponent is forced to capture back with the queen, and this rook is now lost. So the queen has a sort of forced is forced to either move to this square, or they could potentially block with the queen, but that would potentially be checkmate even faster. So only really one move, and at this point the opponent saw the writing on the wall and opted to resign. Good game, thank you very much. GG. Chess.com uses Stockfish 12 for its server-based analyses, which is what I normally use to depth 30. Its in-browser analysis uses a newer version of Stockfish 14, and it was very interesting to me that the newer Stockfish found the aggressive opening response that was not identified by the older version. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.